So I'm Richard Esplin. I don't know how many people were able to attend Lightning Talks yesterday. Just to catch up anybody who didn't attend yesterday, there's two styles. There's Ignite style Lightning Talks with auto-advancing slides. And at the end, we'll have a couple traditional Lightning Talks where they have a hard 5-minute limit. There's a hard 5-minute limit with whatever type of Lightning Talk. With the Ignite style, though, because the slides auto-advance, they'll always get through their presentation. With the traditional, they might not get to the end. So it's kind of a challenge for the speakers to do things to meet the requirements of the type of Lightning Talk they're giving. So that's part of the fun. So we're going to start the presentation. Same instructions as yesterday. When the stop sign comes up, you have to stop. For the Lightning Talks, the traditional Lightning Talks, I'm going to stand probably over here with the big clock. And at the end of 5 minutes, we will cut you off. But if it's budgeted for a minute between presenters, but practice shows that it's taken a little less than that. So you can start early if you're ready early. You don't have to wait to start. And I believe that's everything. So I'll start the timer.
Cool. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm David Webster. I'm an Alfresco engineer, for those who don't know me. I work on Share as part of the UI team, and for the next 5 minutes I'm going to be talking to you about time zones and how we handle them within Share. First up, I'll explain what the problem is. And the problem is that we've got one server in one time zone normally, and then lots of users in time zones all over the world. And the server doesn't know what time zone that they're in, so can't display times in the UI in the right time zone for them. One of the tools we use to kind of help us solve that is my favorite ISO standard. Everyone's got one. ISO 8601 is my favorite, and basically it's a time format. And you can see here at the end, there's that plus 1 hour. And that's the time zone offset. So that indicates that this time is 1 hour ahead of UTC. And what we do with UTC time in the Alfresco database is so all times that are generated through Alfresco, we store them in the database in UTC with a 0 offset or Zulu time. So that's UTC. That's how we store time. Problem with using time zone offset, or problem with using offsets is that they're not the same as time zones. So in the UK, during the summer, our offset is 1 hour, so we're 1 hour ahead of UTC. But during the winter, we're back on UTC, so our offset's 0. So the offset changes in a time zone depending on the time of year, if that time zone uses daylight saving times. So one of the ways to get around that is to actually use the Olsen time zone string, and that basically encodes the region and the city into a string. And that's not something we use yet within Alfresco, but we're hoping to do so at some point in the future. Now, this, I don't know if you can read that, but it's an example of the headers that Share sends when it makes a REST API call. And there's nothing in that the server can use to determine the time zone. But luckily, JavaScript to the rescue. There's that getTimeZoneOffset method that we can use on the client within the browser to find out what the offset is for the user. And using that offset, there's a third-party library that we don't currently use, but might do soon, that does clever stuff, and that can actually determine the time zone that user is in. So within Share, we make REST API calls to the repo, and all the data we get back from that are encoded in ISO 8601 format with the offset. And what we then do with that, the exception to that is all-day events within the calendar. So, for example, something like Christmas happens 25th of December everywhere in the world, regardless of the time zone. So we don't send the offset back with the all-day events. And the other exception is for recurrence rules, because the last Monday of the month is not the same as the last Sunday of the month with a different offset. we don't adjust those within the UI. So we display them and include the offset in the UI so the user knows what time zone that recurrence rule relates to. But when Share gets that ISO 8601 date, first thing we do is we convert it to a date object. So you can see here, top line there, you've got +8 hours. And then, so we convert that to a date object. I did this on my computer a few weeks back, and then we were still on British summertime, so it's converted that locally to my client time. And then we can use other JavaScript util methods to render that out in a friendly way using our standard libraries for whatever way we want to render that date to the user. And basically, because we do that, hopefully the user then gets their date, gets the date in their local time zone, and that makes for lots of happy users. And so that's something that's in Share 4.0. And what we're hoping to do in the future is provide a way of allowing the user to be more specific. So if they want to specify a time zone or let Share know what time zone they're in, they can do that. And we're hoping to, at some point, also include that in the calendar UI, so you can specify what time zone the events occur in. And that's the end of my talk. If anyone's got any questions, those are my contact details. Let me know. Thank you.
Okay, are we good? All right. Here to talk about hackathons, just a very quick how-to. My name is Nathan. I work as a technical consultant with Alfresco. For those that are still in the room, I just gave the PDF toolkit talk a few minutes ago, and hopefully we'll get our slides going here in just a moment. That's one of the downsides to the Ignite format, right? I gotta wait. So what is a hackathon? A hackathon is a really intensely collaborative event where we bring together a bunch of smart people, we define a very tightly scoped set of problems, and we set out to solve them in a very fixed time frame. Sometimes that's 8 hours, it's a day, sometimes it's an overnight or a weekend. It's an opportunity to work with some other people that you may not have met before to explore and create in a really supportive, energetic environment. The keys there, I think, are supportive and energetic. You've got to be able to help each other with problems because they're going to come up. Why do they work? Well, a lot of companies use these, and they work for a couple of reasons. They work because there's no distractions, hopefully. You're setting aside dedicated time for a dedicated set of tasks. Putting a lot of resources in one place also helps. If you run into a blocking issue or a problem, you can go to one of the people that are there with you and get help. So how do I get started? Well, the first thing to do is brainstorm. What do you want to build? Is it around a specific product, a specific problem, a new API? Set some high-level expectations, seed a few projects to get people thinking about why they're there. But don't get wedded to those. Step 2 is find your audience. You've got to know who you want to be there. What skills do you need? Do you need developers? Do you need engineers? Do you need people with JSON or Java or Python? And don't get stuck with just tech skills. You need testers, you need designers, you need facilitators. Get some space is step 3. So you need a place to do this thing, right? Someplace isolated, hopefully, someplace where you can shut out the world a little bit. Get some things that you need in advance. Get your whiteboards, flip charts, plenty of power outlets. That is hugely important. And step 4 is get to work. So when we kick one of these things off, we started off with like a 10-minute kickoff meeting. We introduce the facilitator, we go around the room, introduce everybody else, set some rules of engagement, a start-stop time, a 30-minute stand-up to pitch projects. So this is where everybody goes around and they say, well, here's what I'd like to build today. Go ahead and put your teams together and then get started writing code. The critical thing is to get coding as quickly as possible. If you spend a whole bunch of time in the morning trying to figure out what's the rules of engagement, who's going to be here, what roles do they play, it's not going to be that productive. Some tips and lessons learned from the 3 hackathons we've done so far. New people, new ideas. Don't get stuck in teams with just people from the same company, right? If you've got a whole bunch of people there from the community, try to break them up. Make them work with people they don't know yet. Know who the event is for. This is a really, really critical one. A hackathon is not for the host. It is absolutely for the people that are in attendance. We come with our own ideas, some seed topics, some things we might like to see happen at the hackathon, but you have to be prepared to let those go. Always have a facilitator. The facilitator can work on some projects, can be a hackathon participant as well, but having somebody there who's dedicated to go around and answer questions, kind of be the human Google machine, clarify some things around the goals. Another tip, design matters, but results matter more. At some hackathons, people will get so bogged down in design decisions that they don't actually start writing code. And hackathon code is not production-ready stuff. It's not going to be. It's a proof of concept. It's an idea. Code from the hackathon can be a strong beginning, but it's never the final version, right? I mean, anybody who's done engineering knows writing code is only like the 10%. You've still got to get unit tests. You've still got to do QA. You've still got to fit it into a release cycle. I mean, there's so much more to development than just writing it. So to that end, disposable code, proof of concept, great, do it. It might be totally disposable code, but if it maps out some unknown space and helps you learn something you didn't know before, then absolutely it's still valuable. Even if it turns out to be a complete dead end, at least you know now that that is a dead end, right? You didn't know that before. So don't count on the hackathon code ever seeing the light of day as production code. That is really, really unlikely. Don't dictate tools. This is a huge mistake I've made in the past, sending out emails saying, hey, you should show up with these things installed. Don't bother. Don't do that. Coders are like craftspeople, right? I mean, you wouldn't go to a woodworker and say, you have to use this brand of saw. Just let them bring their own tools. They know what they like. If things don't go as planned, celebrate the failures. We all fail. It happens. And the only true failure is the one that you don't reflect on and you don't learn anything from. So if you have ambitious goals, maybe next time you scope it smaller. If you didn't know the technology as well as you thought, well, at least now you know what you need to focus on learning, right? Make sure to write it up and share it too. Don't keep it to yourself, because other people can learn from these things as well. I mean, this is all about a shared experience, getting together, building something, and learning from each other. When the event gets close to the end, put out a 1-hour warning. People need time. They need to know that they're heading into the last hour. They need to be able to test the build, polish things up, get it committed. The second thing is demo. So at the end of it, do a demo. Let people show off what they've built. Once the event's actually concluded, your demo's done, don't forget to do the follow-up. The results of a hackathon should be put up someplace where everybody can get to it. So GitHub, Google Code, whatever you got. If you have promising projects, follow up with them. There's just one really good article on Facebook's hackathons, and I'm done.
So I think the answer is you actually walk very slowly up, waiting for your slides to appear. Didn't walk slow enough. Hi guys, my name is Paul Hampton. I'm in product marketing at Alfresco. If you were here for John's keynote speeches, there was a lot of talk about Hybrid ECM, and I thought it'd be worthwhile just talking a little bit about Hybrid ECM, what it is, how it works, how you can get it. I'm going to talk about it for 5 minutes. First part is a use case, giving you an example of why you'd want to use Hybrid ECM. The second part then is how to get it up and running, what you need from Alfresco, and how you actually use it. This is Jack. Jack's in marketing, and as part of his job, Jack has to work with a lot of people that are outside his organization. He works for with press agencies, with the advertising agencies and media agencies. And part of that work, he has to collaborate with them. And how does he do that? He sends a lot of files. There could be documents going to the press agency, there could be images going to the advertising agency, and video files coming from his media agency. The problem is that Jack cannot share these easily with the people outside his organization. Jack's using ECM in his organization, but it's protected by a firewall. And what you're going to find is the IT guys aren't going to let you open up that firewall to let those agencies come in and access all of that content inside his on-premise systems. The other problem you've got is, go on to this, the other problem that Jack has is he has to support the sales team. The sales team are out there and they've all got these nice new mobile devices and they want to be able to access this content when they're out of the office. But the problem you've got is these guys are not going to be able to VPN through that firewall to be able to access that content. So Jack has two problems. How does he collaborate with those agencies and how does he support his sales team? The answer is he goes off and uses a public file sharing site. So he'll start putting documents up in Google Docs, or he'll start putting stuff up in Dropbox. He'll open up a private folder in Dropbox, make it public, put some content in there and start sharing it. He may be using the iCloud and sharing stuff there. The problem is that Jack is now putting all of that corporate content out into many different places. He's doing it for a good reason, because he needs to share this content. He needs to collaborate on this content to get his job done. But the problem is you end up with that content spread all over the place. From an enterprise point of view, I've lost control of my content. I don't know where it is. Some of it's in Google, some of it's in the iCloud, some of it's on Dropbox. So the answer is hybrid ECM. Now I have Alfresco on-premise. I'm also using Alfresco in the cloud, and I can build a synchronization between that. So Jack can start a project on-premise. He can create a folder. I want to work with my PR agency. I synchronize that to the cloud. They update some content. All those changes are automatically synced. So all of that content is always kept in sync. At the end of the project, Jack just says, I want to unsync this, and now the only copy sits on-premise. It's taken away from the cloud, deleted from the cloud. He can also publish content for the sales teams. So when he does a new white paper, when he does a new presentation, he just publishes that to the cloud, and now the guys can get access to that content without having to go through firewalls, without having to go via VPN. What do you need to run Alfresco Hybrid ECM? You need to be on the latest version of Alfresco, 4.1.x. I think it's 4.1.3 is the latest version. You need to be on either a standard subscription or an enterprise subscription. If you're on an enterprise subscription, we include that connector to allow you to do that sync. If you're on a standard, there's an additional cost for that. You need a new license key because the license key does enable that sync capability between the two. Once you've added a new license, you'll see on the profile, there's a new block on there, the cloud sync credentials. Click on there, it'll ask you to log into the cloud. So I'm doing this from on-premise, I'm identifying myself to the cloud, and basically setting up my user ID for the cloud. Once I've done that, I've got a folder, I want to synchronize this to the cloud. I come down and say, sync to the cloud. What it'll then do is open up a window and navigate to the cloud. It will navigate to the cloud. And here you can see the different networks I've got access to, the sites on each network, and then where I want to synchronize that folder to. I can synchronize it into the cloud, make changes on-premise, on the cloud, all those changes are synced. Once it's synced, you get a new little icon, a little cloud just tells me this folder is now synchronized to the cloud. If I click on that, I can get some sync information. So I can see when it was synced, where it's synced in the cloud, and again, I can go and request a new sync for that, or I can unsync. There are some new cloud sync options. So there's unsync from the cloud, view in the cloud, and request a sync. Request a sync, there is a timer that wakes up every now and then and does the synchronization, but again, you can force a sync should you want to do that. At the end of a project, you can break a sync. So I can go back in and say I want to unsync that from the cloud. I can then click that the box there that says I want to remove the content, and that will break the sync and actually remove the content from the cloud, and now our only copy will be on-premise. More information, documentation, just search for Cloud Sync. You'll find lots of information there. The wiki, there are some blogs. David Webster's put together a great blog on the hybrid capability, and there's some sort of marketing blogs out there as well. So that's the end of my 5 minutes.
I'm going to use the extra 1 minute because 15 years in 5 minutes is very, very challenging. I'm Shoeb Sarguroh, and after graduation, I was born with Documentum's API manual. So once upon a time, I knew a lot of DMCL and DFC APIs without any problems. My friend Carlos thinks that I'm too young, but if I was doing Documentum customization, I would have been walking with the walking stick here. Documentum was one of the things that I used to do in the past, but I do a lot of Alfresco these days. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm based out of Glasgow, and this story is going to be in an Indian-Scottish accent. So bear with me for the next 5 minutes. It all starts from once upon a time in the early 90s. We had a lot of ECM products. They all specialized in different things. Documentum was a good server. FileNet, good as workflows and things like that. But they never gave you all of ECM. It was just like, okay, we are good in this, we are good in that. And then all of a sudden, there was panic acquisitions. Documentum started buying eRooms, Bulldog, TrueArc, just to put all the functionalities in a closed loop product. But they still couldn't get it right. Microsoft never gets it right, and they will never, ever get it right. It was just like, oh, do you have a carrot? I have a stick. Let's merge and give them both carrot and a stick. And we all started selling ECM products claiming to be doing everything in ECMs. Then what happened? They still couldn't do things right. It was all customizations, heavy customization. I've seen WebTop being customized to death, and it's still being used all over the world. So it really feels sorry for customers who still use WebTop. It was good old days for consulting. 600 days of consulting, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 10 was microfilm being migrated into Documentum repository. I'm not sure if they still do that these days, but that was a lot of good revenue for consulting days. No wonder we are out of those good old days and into recession, because I don't think with Alfresco we can do a lot of these things. It's fast, rapid application development these days. You can use web scripts, you can use a lot of things in Alfresco. So a successful implementation was something that a customer used to ask for, and you end up giving projects and solutions that they would never, ever end up using. And I've seen solutions being parked and not being used by users. But it's not that these days. If you use web scripts, if you use dashlets, and if you keep it simple, you can really get an Alfresco up and running within 60 days. If you want that, just let me do that for you. The other thing we had problems was Netscape and Internet Explorer. There were literal clauses in RFPs. Does your product work with Netscape and Internet Explorer? And we used to scratch our head, can right-side customization work? And we used to have this nice little Documentum workspace client which worked in both platforms. PXGGYAVFXQ, that was the license, I still remember that. But hundreds and hundreds and lines of code of Doc Basic and right-side customization, but we still couldn't get there. We don't have browser-specific problems that we used to have in those days. We still have some issues, but not to the extent that we had. .NET, no comments. If you're still using .NET, then you're in problems. Collaboration in those days was new. There was only one person who knew about collaboration, John Newton, scientist John Newton. And I couldn't find a single picture of him facing the other side. I might not have tried it hard. But he only talked about Alfresco in those days, but technology wasn't on his side. So what John Newton did was what a section of Scottish society wanted, independence. Become independent and contribute towards the community, which he did. And we have a good product called Alfresco. Give him a good hand. I have 2 seconds to give John and his team to give us a wonderful product which works and is very collaborative. The other thing that was a problem in those, it wasn't a problem, but it was only document-centric. I remember storage was very expensive, and we literally wrote code in C and Unix to transfer, not archived, but active, non-used documents into jukeboxes and then bring them back on demand. So it was very expensive in terms of storage. These days, no problem with storage. We have clouds everywhere and can rain anywhere you like. But you have a lot of social content management to maintain, tweeting. If you fire someone, you need to maintain those tweets in your storage. So every little thing that comes up need to be maintained. And you never know. Legislations would be out, tweeted, and there will be legis tweeting with government saying that's the source of information for you. So things have changed ever since. The other thing John Powell touched yesterday, which is correct, ECM was for the elite. We used to hear Documentum signing billions and billions of dollars of contracts, and it was quite a big excitement for us. But with Alfresco, Thank you very much. Even SMEs and a primary school in Glasgow uses Alfresco to run the school. This is one of the examples where you can see how you can use Alfresco even in small schools, and that's an innovation. And my video doesn't work. So I have an extra 5 seconds, 15 seconds.
Let's see if we can do it. Anybody who's here early saw it work.
But
Assalamualaikum. I'm Ms. Waris, the school administrator. We use ILE for collaboration and discussions between management, staff, pupils and parents. I use ILE to manage correspondence, pupil profiles, policies and procedures. ILE is a great tool for the school.
the whole school works on Alfresco, and we use Alfresco for collaboration between parents, staff, management, and pupils pupils as small as young as primary 3 and primary 4 will start collaborating with their teachers and with parents. That's all about it. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any problems with your customized Documentum projects heading towards a dead end and you need some resuscitation, I'm more than happy to give some life into it and get it to work. So please feel free to get in touch if there's any migration or anything to do with a successful ECM implementation. Thanks a lot.
It's on. All right. I think it's on. No, it's got a green light. There we go. All right. Okay. My name is Jared Ottley. I'm an integration engineer at Alfresco, and I'm going to talk about Spring-Social-Alfresco and Spring-Social-Alfresco. Anybody here know what Spring-Social is? You guys are working at Alfresco. It don't matter. All right. Okay. So Spring-Social. Don't get confused by the name. It's not just about social. Spring-Social is an extension to the Spring framework that allows you to be able to work with platform as a service type things. Basically, you can think of it, if you need OAuth and you have an API behind that you want to be able to work with, Spring-Social is what will make that possible for you to make it, build Java applications to be able to do that. So it help you do the dance and be able to do that. What Spring-Social includes, out of the box, you could say support for Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And then there's a whole slew of community projects out there. There will be projects here that you will never have seen or heard of or probably will ever use. So 500px, anybody know what 500px is? I don't know what 500px is. Spring-Social, what it allows you to be able to do beyond just these community ones, be able to build the infrastructure that you need to do to be able to do the dance, be able to have the correct workflow for your applications. Now, and you can build these not just into web applications, but I've also, through some testing and also with the Hack-a-thon that we did in Berlin, built one just as a client-side app on a Java command line where you're able to pass in your credentials for approval in those. Now, Alfresco uses Spring-Social in a couple places. We use it in the Spring-Social, or in the social publishing of Alfresco. So we use it for Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Flickr to be able to post that content to those. The Alfresco integration team uses this for the Google Dropbox integration and for the Google Docs integration. The Google Dropbox is actually a fork of the community project. The community project doesn't support all of the API and doesn't allow you to be able to do all of the parameters that you want to be able to do with it. And I'm going to get a little bit ahead of myself here. Spring-Social Google Docs is also a little bit of a fork. We tried to use a Spring-Social Google project, but it was only built for the JSON services, so the newer services from the Google platform, Google API, and we needed something that would still do Atom Pub, which is what Google Docs does. It also, you don't have to implement a full wrapper, or the full API. You can use wrappers. So if there are client libraries that exist, like for Google Docs, there's GData. We just wrapped the GData API, or the GData client, so that we're able to do that one. So this Alfresco provides within it as well a persistence layer now, and this is in 4.1 in community, to be able to allow you to persist your OAuth tokens for OAuth 1 and OAuth 2. This provides very, very basic CRUD operations for those tokens, be able to create them, update them, read them, delete them. They can be shared or they can be personal tokens. And then you can look them up by the remote system ID. And this is just the ID that you give it. So if you're doing a Dropbox integration, you would call it Dropbox and you would persist that to the user accounts. So those are stored encrypted. Doesn't do any refresh. And so you'll still need to do that with your other stuff. Spring-Social-Alfresco is a project that we started for the public API. It is not supported by Alfresco. It's supported by the community. So if you guys are interested in being involved with it and being able to use it, make it better, more than happy to have you join up with us. So it supports both the RESTful JSON API part of it as well as CMIS. So it has CMIS 1.0 support. When the cloud moves to 1.1, we'll be able to quickly switch that, and so you'll be able to continue to use that. All right, how to make that happen. So first you need to be able to create a connection factory. And this is taking your consumer key and secret that you would get from whoever the provider is for your application. You then want to create these parameters, or have parameters that you're going to pass, which I'm going to move really quick for those. You take those parameters, you get a URL that you can then use to call a UI, a web-based UI that you can then pass the username and password to do this, and you'll get back a token that you can then exchange for access. Once you have that token and you exchange it for access, you can take that token and get a grant operation to be able to get the API. Now the REST API, the Spring-Social-Alfresco is pretty easy. You can see right there. Once you get that Alfresco object, get the home network of the user. You can get all the other information. The same for CMIS. CMIS works just like if you were building a standalone CMIS application against an on-prem Alfresco instance. So you be able to get the session, be able to query for different objects, be able to put new content in there just as if you were working with a standard Alfresco. And I bet this one's going to take a little bit longer for me. But that's Spring-Social-Alfresco. He's found it on GitHub. Spring Social is, you can go to the Spring Social site. Most of those things are also found on GitHub as well.
Okay. Hello?
It's TypeScript. Let's just check. I'll start the time.
Might as well get started. I'm Steve Reiner from Integrated Semantics. And next slide. It's not working. Okay. What this talk is about is I'm looking for something that I could port my flex spaces and CMIS spaces and flexible dashboard for BI dashboards for large flex apps, and I want to port them to HTML5 and JavaScript. And so I was searching for that. I've been looking a long time for how to do this. And what I wanted was where you go to JavaScript, and you develop in the more ActionScript-like language, because it gives you sort of the types and the classes that make developing large apps easier, and static typing too for compile time. And I also like IDEs. I'm a wimp. I like IDEs. I hate to admit it, but I am. And one of the options is to still use ActionScript and translate it. And there's Falcon.js from Adobe, and they still haven't come out with it, so they've been slow to come out with it. The other thing is Django from Core Media. And then, so developers really didn't start using this. I mean, some small number of people. But the thing happened is that Google, Dart, and Microsoft TypeScript came out, so there's better things out there that are starting to take off. I don't think Dart's taking off, but I think TypeScript is really taking off. So I'm sort of comparing Dart versus TypeScript. So Dart is a nice language, JavaScript-like. It has nice libraries, a good IDE. But the interoperability with JavaScript is really awkward, and you have to do a lot of work. And then also the generated code, generated JavaScript code is very complex because it's got to have isolates, because they're assuming that they have two VMs even when they do it all in JavaScript, you know, Dart VM and JavaScript VM. So when they translate to JavaScript, they have all these isolates in the code to make it work when there's two VMs. Then there's CoffeeScript. Somebody asked about CoffeeScript. CoffeeScript, the disadvantage is you don't have type checking. So that's out, and it's also not JavaScript syntax. So TypeScript, you know, hold your nose. It's from Microsoft. They suck. We all hate them. But you know, they did a good job with the TypeScript. It extends, TypeScript extends JavaScript, and like any JavaScript code is valid TypeScript code, and then it's open source, it's Apache 2.0, and it has some ECMAScript 6. They're trying to be in line with that. And you use it in Node.js to do server-side things, and you actually run the command line compiler in Node.js because the compiler is written in TypeScript, so it's can use that. And the coolest thing is that there's you can use existing JavaScript libraries and wrap them with a separate file without having to touch the file. So that's really cool, and it's really taken off. And the TypeScript's in the preview phase, so it's not done yet. There's a bunch of IDEs, Visual Studio 2.12, and you get IntelliSense and type checking and debugging, and there's some others coming. So I started doing TypeScript for Alfresco, doing libraries for Alf.js. I wrapped that already. I'm just going to start wrapping the CMIS JS stuff, and then other stuff for the cloud APIs. And then my Flex spaces and CMIS spaces, I'm porting those to this. So you have app components for TypeScript and PhoneGap and Air with desktop syncing and drag drop, and the cloud too, Alfresco Cloud. And but if people are interested, I'll do a shared dashlet where you can do it in TypeScript. Or it'll be an example using a shared dashlet written in TypeScript. So you'd have IntelliSense and type checking for developing shared dashlets. And also in theory, you could use it for Alfresco web scripts. If people are interested in that, just let me know. And where to find more, there's my websites, the TypeScript, and the one good one is definitely typed in GitHub, because they have a whole collection of TypeScript definition wrapper files for jQuery, Knockout, all kinds of libraries they already wrapped. Like in the first few weeks, they had it already wrapped, you know, the community. And then, let's see what else. And my Twitter. Hey, I finished early.
Hello, hello. Is that coming over? I can hear you without the mic. I know, but can you hear me with the mic? He hasn't started it yet. Okay, you've ruined my first slide now. Ruined the surprise. Okay. Okay, so while Richard tries to get the timer going, I'm going to get going anyway. Thanks, Steve, for proving that we can do it without the Ignite style format. I just wanted to do this because I just love these clickers. They're great, aren't they? So my name's Will Abson. I'm part of the integrations team in Alfresco. I'm the other half of the integrations team, along with Jared. I do more of the sort of UI, the pretty stuff. Jared does the serious stuff. I also manage a project called Share Extras, so we've got about 30 add-ons there. This is one of the add-ons that is on Share Extras. This is a dashlet. I developed this dashlet initially in order to display a map view of documents that are geotagged, so geotagged photos, say, for example. And Alfresco can strip out that metadata from geotagged pictures. It can pull out the EXIF data and put that into the repository, index it. So this dashlet I originally implemented in Google Maps, and I've now transformed it to use Leaflet, which I'm going to talk about today. Leaflet is really cool. It looks good. The question people ask me most about Leaflet is it Google Maps? Well, yes and no. Yes, it's a map, but it's quite different in terms of architecture and the way it's configured and set up from Google Maps itself. So yes and no. The way that you put Leaflet into the page is like any JavaScript-based framework. You have to include the JavaScript file where Leaflet itself is defined. There's also some CSS and another CSS file for IE, because IE before IE8 is horrible. Then you have, inside your body, you have an empty div, which you give an ID. And then you have some JavaScript, which actually does some work using Leaflet to put some content in that div. This is the first thing you have to do in your JavaScript there. You have to create a map. Now, this doesn't do what you think it does. It creates the map placeholder. It uses that div, which we're identifying by map there. And we're setting a center there and a zoom level, which is 13. Zoom levels go between 1 and 14, I think it is. Pretty similar for Google Maps. That's pretty zoomed in, actually, 13. Then you have to add a layer. So it doesn't automatically draw the map. You have to add a layer, which gives you the tiles for the map. Here we're using OpenStreetMap. This is the biggest difference between Google Maps and Leaflet here. Leaflet allows you to plug in any mapping provider where the tiles adhere to a standard URL structure. So you just plug that into Leaflet as a tile layer. You can actually have multiple layers if you want to, and you can switch between those if you need to. There are controls that allow you to do that, just like Google Maps would switch between the satellite view and the map view, etc. And then at the end, once you've got that tile layer, it's just basically an anonymous object. You add it to the map. To add a marker, that's another very common thing to do. You create that marker object. That marker method returns itself. So you can chain these methods, add it to the map. You're also chaining the bind pop-up method. So you're going to add a pop-up to the map, and then you're going to open that pop-up. If you compare that with Google Maps, that's much more straightforward. So that's pretty cool. You can also do cool things like this, adding shapes to the map pretty easily. Leaflet is based on HTML5, so you can very easily add shapes in an advanced way that is supported across all the modern browsers. That's the wrong way. So why should you use Leaflet? It has lots of features. It's pretty young. I think it's about version 0.3 at the moment, but it has a lot up there already. It has a plugin-based architecture. So there are plugins to do clusters of map pins, for instance. That's a really common one that's used. If you've got lots of map pins, sometimes they overlap each other. A cluster plugin is really popular. It allows you to cluster those together. It's standard-based, as I mentioned. It's pretty small, so that's nice. And you can use it with any mapping provider. Mapbox is a big commercial one used by Twitter and Foursquare now as an alternative to Google Maps. And there's a lot of these around. CloudMade is UK-based. We like UK-based companies. And the key point is, don't lock yourself in. Don't lock yourself into Google Maps. Using Leaflet, you can switch mapping providers as you need to. That's it.
So one more quick hand for all of our brave presenters.